Welcome to another edition of 100% Hockey, celebrating Hockey Night in Canada. This will be the first fall schedule that Hockey Night in Canada does not exist on the CBC schedule since 1952. And for this month, we are celebrating the greatness of the show and of the people on that show. Today, a little bit different. We talk with Mark Askin, a longtime producer of Hockey Night in Canada, his reflections on working on the show, working with the people, and what it meant to be part of the greatness of HNIC. And Glenn Adamo, the former vice president of broadcasting for the National Hockey League. He got hired in 1993 by Gary Bettman and inherited working with the longest running primetime sports show in North America. And really, what can a vice president of broadcasting in New York tell the boys at Hockey Night in Canada? I think you'll enjoy this one. Both are glib and honest and, quite frankly, passionate about the game on television and the game as a whole. That's Glenn Adamo and Mark Askin on this edition of 100% Hockey, remembering Hockey Night in Canada.
Face Off Inside the NHL returns, taking you deeper behind the scenes than ever before. See it all from the star-studded Four Nations Face Off tournament.
Us against the world, boys.
To the adrenaline of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
I'm scared of you guys.
With candid interviews and backstage access, experience the sacrifice, the rivalries, and the determination that define NHL greatness.
Just when I thought last year couldn't be topped, here we are.
A new season of Face Off Inside the NHL. Watch now only on Prime Video.
Welcome back to 100% Hockey, reflecting on the greatness of Hockey Night in Canada. Pleased to be joined by two guys that had an impact on the show in its time, in their time. Mark Askin, a longtime producer with Canadian Sports Network, Oldmeyer Communications, Molstar Communications, but was a Saturday night producer for Hockey Night in Canada. And the former executive vice president of broadcasting for the National Hockey League in New York City, Glenn Adamo. Gentlemen, welcome to a show that is talking about, I think, the most successful primetime sports show in North America until this year, when it has been announced that it will no longer exist on national television, and the four famous words, Hockey Night in Canada, will sit in mothballs for the near future. So, Glenn, you're the token American on this show.
Well, hold on. Token American via Emil Francis and his family, which I grew up with. So I'm like half Canadian.
Honorary Canadian, Lenny.
Yeah, we might make you the honorary Canadian at some point, but we're not. Don't push it. Yeah, or we'll just charge you a tariff. So when you got the job, you came from NBC. You did a marvelous work there, whether it be in hockey or in tennis. But when you got the job as vice president of broadcasting for the NHL, and you were said you got to deal with the Canadians, what was it like thinking that you were trying to talk to Canadians about something that they think they know better than you?
Well, the good news is I had produced 3 All-Star games on NBC. So I knew all the guys. I knew you, I knew Claude, I knew Mark. I knew all the guys because NBC was doing the All-Star game. And for me, I grew up playing hockey. Hockey is my only passion, candidly. And I understood what Hockey Night in Canada meant to the Canadian people. So my goal was not to try to, quote unquote, teach or revise anything Hockey Night was doing. My goal was to take all the things that hockey did really well, Hockey Night in Canada, that is, and then translate it to an American audience to teach them. For example, when I first got in, the first thing that used to bother me was the way the U.S. broadcasters covered the game with the game camera. they would not understand that the game camera was supposed to take you to the puck. You didn't need to follow the puck. Much like in football, American football, you don't follow the football. You kind of follow and then you kind of pull out and you kind of watch the play happen. Same in hockey. So it took a little bit of retraining, so to speak, and a lot of phone calls. But my respect and admiration for what Hockey Night did was really the underpinning of a lot of the things that we undertook in the States to really make it better until Fox came in with the fire puck. But other than that, it was a fun time.
Mark, before we talk about your career as a Hockey Night producer, what were your first reflections of what Hockey Night was, even as a kid for you?
So I'm not sure, and I think this is part of, so many people think the world started the day they were born. And I think we have to know what Hockey Night in Canada meant, because at one point in the 60s and the 50s, when they came on the air, the game had already either been played for a half an hour or an hour. Mm-hmm. So the game may start at 8, the broadcast wouldn't start till 9. They were convinced who's going to go to the games if it's going to be free on TV. They soon realized that didn't have a problem with Canadians. And so as a kid, I would be sitting watching Danger Man or whatever show, Perry Mason, and I'd be waiting for 8:30 until the game came on. And they'd say, we joined the play in the first period and the Leafs lead 3-0. Yes. Like, I'd be thrilled as a Leaf fan to hear that. So it was appointment viewing, because in those days, 2 games a week in Toronto, Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday, and maybe a game on Wednesday that was on CTV. That's it. Mm-hmm. So Hockey Night in Canada, you talked about it Thursday at school, Friday at school, all week. Game came on. It was the most important show in sports, for sure, in this country. And the way it was covered just had me thinking from an early age, I don't care if I'm a runner. I don't care if they ask me to go and get coffee. I want to be part of the experience. And to this day, that still sits in my home. And that is taken care of. That's the first time I brought it out of mothballs in quite a while, and I'm glad to do it. But the show was a national institution that became known as an international piece of excellence.
By the way, as a kid, we used to pray that there were fights in the first period.
100%. 100%.
Because if there were fights, perhaps you're going to get 2 or 3 minutes of hockey action rather than joining the show in progress in the first intermission.
And if I can add one thing, I could listen to the game on CKFH radio. I would there later work there 2 decades later, which is ridiculous, and I would hear the first period. Some people like to be surprised. I'd be listening to Foster or Bill Hewitt on the radio, and then whichever one wasn't doing radio, was doing TV, and you'd get them at the bottom of the clock or 9 o'clock. So it was just incredible.
Glenn, can you reflect on your time as a network producer, production person for, let's face it, this is a grass is greener world we live in. We all dreamed to work at NBC. We all dreamed to work in the United States. But there was something special that I think even Americans would admit that, the Canadians are doing this Hockey Night in Canada thing. It really works.
Yeah, when we first got the All-Star game, Dick Ebersol had said, Glennie, you're an old hockey guy. You played hockey in college. You're going to produce it. And I was thrilled. That's all he had to say to me. It's funny because we would do events. I did football with Dick Enberg, may he rest in peace. And Dick used to do Foster Hewitt. I mean, he used to be we would be rehearsing our opening to football. And Dick would do "Good evening, hockey fans in Canada, the United States, and Newfoundland." I mean, this is what we would do. So we had a kind of a core group at NBC of real hockey nuts. And I just, because I grew up with Mr. Francis and the Rangers and his son Bobby, who was my best man and my son's godfather, we grew up in a hockey house. My dad was a New York City bus driver. I was lucky enough to get a job as a receptionist at WNBC and kind of work my way into the sports department there. But, you know, I just, there's so many great memories of growing up and watching hockey. Now, NBC had hockey. You know, it was Peter Puck. It's and the most enjoyable, one of the most enjoyable days of me taking the job at the NHL was someone gave me a box of film from the original Peter Puck that, of course, I had transferred immediately to tape, to VHS, and then got a cease and desist letter from the company that owned Peter Puck. And then Brian McFarland, I would talk to him about doing stuff for us, but you know, legal people at that time, they weren't too savvy with what the heck hockey was.
By the way, you know how many episodes of Peter Puck there are?
No.
Mark?
I don't know, but it's not as many as you think.
9.
Really?
Right. Yeah,
well,
Brian
I had
told
all
me that
9.
once.
I can tell you that much. They were in one box.
Ronnie Shell.
I have
Ronnie
them
Shell,
on
the voice of Peter Puck.
Yeah.
I have on a VHS tape, all 9 episodes on a VHS tape here somewhere, and then I have to dig out my VHS machine. So, and for anybody under 40, please go to Google and Google VHS.
VHS.
So how did, when you got to the league, then how did you interact with the people that ran Hockey Night? I mean, how important was it that you had to make sure that they were happy?
Well, I mean, first guy I met with was Ronnie Harrison. And Ronnie, may you rest in peace, Ronnie, Sally, and I became an item. I would come up to Toronto every chance I could. We'd go out to dinner. I'd stay over. I'd see him the next day for breakfast. We spent a lot of time together. And you know what? It wasn't that it was planned, but for me, it was more, I really want to understand what the heartbeat of Canada is. I know we have to create a heartbeat in the U.S., but I really wanted to understand what made Hockey Night so very special. Very different than in the States. I mean, I think we have way too many choices here, but even back then, Ronnie was really, he pushed and would constantly push for stuff. Mark, you'll remember this. The night in Toronto, we put the camera in the net and had to put the truck, not truck tires, but the truck
fender
protection, and that we painted white so that no one would get upset. And then during the game, we had really, really good, that camera in the net really turned out to be something that all you guys pushed. And I was like, great, let's keep pushing. And you know what? ESPN, go ahead.
Glennie, I'll tell you a quick story that night. I produced that game, and they forgot to put protection properly around the net cam. And it was out, they didn't have a different net. So the net with the net cam went out for the warm-up, and the players see it.
Destroyed.
And they're fired. Yes, well, it was the Leafs back then, so they didn't hit it. But I'm just kidding. But it was just incredible to think that was really something. To see that was phenomenal, and giving a fan at home,
whole new look.
I didn't interrupt, but that was like, I'll never forget that night. We were all there together.
No, that was really special. I mean, look, then all of a sudden ESPN felt compelled to, Mark Quinzel at the time wanted to compete. He wanted to be as good as Hockey Night, which with all due respect, they never will be. But they then tried to do the camera over the goal, behind the goal, and I'll never forget Jack, not Parker, I was going to say Jack, in Pittsburgh. Who was president of the club, he had me put a camera up and sat in every seat in the section behind to see who was going to get blocked. We wound up purchasing we gave the people who had the seats, we gave them tickets that night for another section. But that was how it all started. We just did a lot of stuff. And you know what? In fairness, everybody had ideas. But we really had Gary's blessing, and I'm throwing roses because he deserved it. He he pushed all of us to have the best of everything. Just do it. Just go ahead and do it. The kick plates were blue in a lot of places, you'll remember. We did a test with the puck and I'll never forget, canary yellow kick plates because it showed better on camera. And I said to Gary, I went in his office with a kick plate that was blue, kick plate that was red, and a kick plate that was yellow with a puck in each. And I showed him video, and he said, great, send the memo out to all the teams, tell them that they have to have this done in the next 2 weeks. I mean, it was really, I was living a dream in so many ways because we were really affecting how the game was portrayed,
For the record, kick plates were at the discretion of the clubs.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You could do anything you wanted at that point. There was no uniform style to kick plates. The Montreal Forum was baby blue for the longest time, right, with their kick plates. Which and when I say that means you were in the Stanley Cup final almost every year for a long period of time. You'd mentioned Fox. How could you justify what you were doing with Fox and not offer it to Hockey Night?
It was a Fox deal. They Stan Honey and Jerry Gepner decided they were going to do this, and they took us out. Gary, Steve Solomon, myself went out and met with Rupert out in L.A. And they had the truck out there, and they showed us what the puck can do. The challenge was how it affected the puck, because we had to go to in Glasgow, who made the pucks for the league, and do testing. And I did testing with them for a good 3 months before we ever let anything happen. Turned out that different glues and solvents had to be used, and it got to a point where we did like I call it the drop test. Whether it bounces or not, and does it bounce the same as the other puck, and when it's on ice and it's cold. We did all these tests, and they certified that we finally had the puck at the position it belonged in without it affecting the game. So we went, called Lou Lamoriello, a good buddy at the Devils, and said, Lou, we really need to test these pucks before we let Fox use them. Can I come after a practice and you have somebody, shoot the puck for us and need a goalie in the net? And he said, yeah, no problem. We get to New Jersey, and we have a dozen pucks, and they're frozen, and we make sure that they're in ice and the whole number. And Sheldon Surrey, I'll never forget it, was shooting from the blue line on Marty Brodeur. And, the first 4 or 5 pucks come at Marty, and then we mixed them up with regular pucks. And Marty would steer one off to the right side. The next one would come, throw it off to the left, and right side. When we were finished, there were 12 pucks on the right-hand side of the net, all of them the Fox pucks. So we talked to him. We said, Marty, what's going on with the pucks? I mean, can you see the difference? He goes, oh, yeah, typical Marty accent too. Those pucks, they're thinner than the others. I said, really? He goes, oh, yeah, they're thinner. I could tell you when they shoot the puck, I tell they're thinner. I was like, oh, my God, that's amazing. So we went back and we measured every single puck, and every one that he said was thinner was like a 32nd, a 16th of an inch thinner than the normal puck. And what was amazing to me is that he could really see that. You think about how good these guys are, and then you hear that. It's like, oh, my God. So we had a real respect, clearly, for the game and guys like that who were, legendary already. And then we wanted Fox to share, and they were not really in the sharing mood. They wanted to make it to be their thing to build the audience in the U.S. I think they put their money where their mouth is. I don't think it was really the best example of what we could have done. Like everybody, they loved that the red tail. They liked it long, and you wind up looking at the end of the tail rather than the puck. I had some issues personally that we discussed, but you know what? They put their money where their mouth is. They spent a little at that time, over $3 million. So if it took off, I'm sure Gary would have made sure that the entire league would have been using Fox Pucks because that's who Gary is.
So I don't know if you remember this, but we have an all-star meeting in New York City in one of the boardrooms, and this is, 2 months before the all-star game. And the all-star game is going to be in Boston this year. And the Fox guys are there, Hockey Night's there, you're there. And you guys come up and show the video of the puck, and we have no clue it's coming. We have no idea. You guys had to peel me off the fucking ceiling.
That wasn't the only time.
No, I know, but I was.
You got that right.
And by the way, it was the best thing that Hockey Night never took. It worked out perfect for us because in the end, we became there was a couple of things we stole from Fox, including the score bug. But we could have scuppered it badly for everybody involved if we had said it's just terrible stuff and it doesn't work for hockey. But we kind of bit our tongue and said whatever's good for the league in the United States, that doesn't mean we need it in Canada.
Right. Okay, so that weekend, Ronnie Forsythe is directing and I'm producing for Hockey Night. And Sandy Grossman, who's a legend, for whatever reason, he liked me. And he called me outside the truck at the Garden. And he said, Mark, if I ever see this in Canada, I'm blaming you. He said, it is awful. He said, awful.
I said,
yeah, we'll never use it. But I said, maybe some people will like it. No, they won't. He was so blunt. I just laughed. And he said, why are you laughing? You are an ordinary Canadian. You just talk so bluntly. But he didn't like it. And I mean, he was, at that point, was there a better director in American sport?
Well, he was Fox's number one director, period.
Yeah.
Number one in every sport.
Yeah, everything.
It's his bluntness that was just right what Glennie's saying. That's so true.
I'll tell you what. Let's take a quick break. Glenn Adamo, Mark Askin, remembering Hockey Night in Canada from their positions within the business of hockey and broadcasting on this edition of 100% Hockey.
With the NHL app, you can listen to every NHL game right from your phone. And with home and away broadcast feeds, you choose your way to listen. Whether you're at work, at the gym, or stuck in traffic, the NHL app puts you right in the action all season long. Every team, every game, everywhere you go. Download the NHL app and never miss a moment.
Welcome back, 100% Hockey, reflecting on Hockey Night in Canada. That is no more for now. I'm sure it will be back at some form, somehow, because the CBC owns the name and the CBC has a right to use it. So, Mark, I've got to ask you, you spent a lot of time in the truck, Maple Leaf Gardens and other places around the National Hockey League. What was it like to work with Don Cherry? I want the truth. I don't want I want the glossy magazine style. Okay, I want the truth.
For me, it was never a challenge. He would tell me what he wanted. Many times it looked like he was just call for it, and bingo, was on the air. No. He was very respectful of the truck and knew that we would get him what he wanted. There were times they used to tape Coach's Corner, especially if we had more than one game, and it would go out. But wherever Don was live, we would be waiting till late in the period to figure out what he wanted to change because something he said he could add on to. So he would be really good about trying to give us as much time as we could. And I asked him one time, it's very kind of you, Grapes, to do that. That helps us out. And he said, well, you guys are making me look good. And so the arrogant side that people think, yes, he was like that. But for the truck, he never called at the last second and said he wanted something. I mean, he probably did it twice, but not like that. Generally, he and Ron had that ability to understand that it was a special moment. And Grapes knew it as much as anybody. Grapes' favorite thing, Johnny, was to get out. Again, this is doing a live show, not being in the Zamboni, being at the Leaf bench in the opening. He loved it. He loved hearing the crowd yell at him, whether it be negative or positive. He loved that energy. So I think sometimes he would tell us he wanted to change Coach's Corner just to give himself another shot at it. But he was, I'm not saying this, I'm telling you, he was wonderful to us. Wonderful. Big time respect. We'd all go out after a game, and usually we ended up, and you know this, Johnny, because you were there, in his room or somebody's room, and he would be extraordinarily kind to those that were off air and were making decisions that affected his show.
And Glenn, what did New York think of Cherry?
Oh, I know I loved him. But
listen, there had to be a point on the Monday morning call or the Monday morning senior staff meeting where somebody said, "Did you watch Cherry on Saturday night?"
Well, it was appointment viewing for all of us. I mean, we watched every week. I mean, it wasn't I think the only thing that ever, as we were trying to build a game in the U.S., remember, very different audiences, as we were trying to build a game, the one thing we wanted Don to kind of, quote unquote, stay away from, and we actually, Ronnie and Don and I had a long conversation once about the fight tapes that he was producing and selling. We just thought selling them in the U.S. wasn't really the way we wanted to image our game. It wasn't the way we wanted to build our game. And we had a difference of opinion. But we didn't withhold his ability to do it. We asked him to just be a little cautious, and he was. And I think the one thing I'll always respect about Don was he was a straight shooter, but he also understood the big picture. I mean, he was always a gentleman to work with and talk to. But I don't think, and I'm not deflecting, I don't remember ever thinking, oh boy, did you hear Cherry, what he said on set? I don't ever remember anyone in our office ever saying anything about him in a negative way. I might not agree with him, but he had a right to his opinion, and he was on the air.
And he got away with saying stuff because he was Don Cherry. So stuff you didn't like, you were used to hearing him everybody go, whoa. But it wasn't whoa because, let's be honest, he talked about European players at times in a very negative fashion. And I didn't agree with him. That doesn't affect how we're doing the show. And a lot of people didn't like it, but they got used to it. And it became part of his swagger. And nobody had a bigger swagger than him. And nobody had an ability. I mean, he united Canada because he bragged about so many of our players. And he would go out with Ron, and they would go in speaking engagements. And he would talk about, I went to, Red Deer, Alberta, because Ron's from there, but whatever. And he would say it was the most unbelievable time. They actually loved me there. They loved me all over Canada. And they did.
Yeah.
And he knew that. And Johnny, I know that you spoke to him because you'd come tell me, going into the weekend. And he was way more organized than you think he was. You might think it's all off the cuff. You can't be that good and just be off the cuff. He knew the message he wanted to send. And that message was 7 minutes or 8 minutes on a Saturday night. And I mean, I don't know if you can prove this or not. He used to tell us the ratings were bigger when Coach's Corner was on than it was for the game. I don't think anybody turned it on. It's, but you felt like it because it was absolutely appointment viewing.
Yeah, I'll tell you, to John's question and your response now, it was, the ratings were bigger in Coach's Corner than they were during the period. And we at some point were talking internally. I remember, I was in those meetings about, well, it'd really be great to figure out how to get Don Cherry on an intermission. And we just thought, even, whether it be Fox or ESPN, it didn't matter. Just his persona and his ability to entertain and his passion for the game. I mean, he spoke from his heart. I mean, you're right. You can't be off the cuff that much, but he knew what message he wanted to send every week. And you know what? We would all stop and watch. I had the games on satellite. So for me, I never missed a Coach's Corner because I had a satellite dish on my house. So every Saturday I'd watch the game illegally a little bit, but I'd watch it, and I'd watch Don Cherry, and I knew what was going on.
You had one of those subtle 10-footers in your backyard, did you?
Yeah. Boy, did I take it from my wife, though. Biggest flower pot in history.
In fact, I'm at the league because it's funny. I followed Ron Harrison, and then I followed you. So,
sorry.
Yeah. Then Don actually did an intermission for NBC when Sam Flood was running NBC during the Ottawa-Anaheim Stanley Cup final. And I still remember this to this day. And Don's wearing the white suit, right? Don is wearing this beautiful white suit. And they get going, and it's not as choreographed. Like we don't choreograph things in Canada like you do in the United States. We don't. Yeah. It's part of the magic of if it works. It is just tremendous. And Don starts talking, and you can see Mike Melbury listening to Don, subtly moving away from Don.
I love it.
And Don was supposed to be on more intermissions in that series, and Don only did one.
Really? I remember one time being in a game, and Mark Tenorti, I don't know how he knew who I was, but he came up to me and he said, "Mark, I'm Mark Tenorti." Wow. And he said, "I want to thank you and Don Cherry for keeping my career going long after I retired, because every time a player went into the board skates first, Johnny, am I right?
Yeah.
We'd roll in Mark Tenorti, and he'd say, this is what happens when you don't protect yourself." And Mark Tenorti, after he was retired, this is 10 years after he retired, said, "Thanks for keeping me alive." And people are thinking, it's all grapes, though. That was his messaging, Johnny.
Yeah.
He'd
Remember when he had
time.
the stop sign that he had the stop sign, "Don't hit from behind"? Right. I was coaching kids hockey, and I had an entire league. I ordered about 2,000 of those stop sign stickers to put on helmets, and we put them on every kid's helmet. And I thanked him one day, and I said, "You probably saved 3 or 4 lives with these kids the way they go into the boards these days." And he was thrilled, that he could make a difference,
So let's talk about coverage. Glenn, you mentioned about game camera, difference in Canada, United States. Mark, I have told this to many people that your coverage of Wendell Clark with isolated replays made Wendell Clark a legend on a very bad hockey team, and it probably made Wendell Clark a millionaire, because when in doubt, if there was a replay to be played, let's show the Wendell ISO. And the Wendell and isolated replays, between Wendell Clark and Wayne Gretzky and all the other great players. The Hockey Night really was the driving force of coverage for that. Play away from the puck. And that's part of coverage I think that Hockey Night deserves credit for what they did.
Storytelling. We talk about this often. It's a lost art. And, we're there. And okay, I'm just going to come to the present for a second. When I went to Amazon for our shows in Canada, I said to them, you can't, if you own a store and you're selling hammers and you say, you know what's wrong with this hammer? Like, it's too heavy. No one's going to buy it. So why are we going around saying this guy should be traded and this? So my whole feeling on Hockey Night was sell the best players. And when the other stuff happens, then we're going to show that for sure. But it isn't necessarily a gimmick, because that never works. Because once the fan at home sees you got a beautiful studio, I hate to tell you, everybody, that's your studio. They don't care. They just want to watch the game. And that is, so sell the best players. And they've been great at Amazon. They agreed. They wanted to do it, and they let us do it. But Hockey Night perfected that.
Yeah.
Hockey Night made those players bigger than, not that they didn't make any mistakes, but I never saw really that many bad plays made by 99, 66 for sure. Mark Messier, just amazing stuff. And that's all because it was, and John Shannon sitting right here is my biggest influence on how I ever covered games for 40 years now. It was take the best people and we're going to have to show the odd mistake they make, but boy, oh boy, why would you tune in? You want to tune in to what? Hey, Glennie? Tune in to watch the best play your favorite sport every
Storytelling,
Saturday.
you said it. Storytelling. It's funny. I fished out this morning from February of '93. 2 weeks before I started at the league, I had 30 things I wanted to accomplish. And this list, I'll show you it sometime. This list, it was coordination with PR, it was selling players, it was we need headshots league wide. And I'll never forget my first broadcast meeting. Mike Baker from Boston said to me, well, why should we trust that you're going to get headshots done? And I'll never forget that. And I said, because you guys haven't been able to do it all these years, so it's on me now. And it was the first time we ever really got league-wide headshots that we paid for. I sent out these little diagrams on how to light it, how to shoot it, what the framing should be, and made it available to everybody. But, I came from NBC, and, Ebersol was ruthless when it came to tell the story. And then, candidly, John and I, after Ronnie, it was John and I would talk, John, 25 times a week, if not more, about, what's coming up and what should we be looking at. And in fairness, look, John and I was one of my best friends in life because we were always honest with each other. And he always pointed out the things that I didn't know as a friend. He would say, you really should think about this. And I think our coverage in the States got better because of a lot of the things we did together. For that game camera, I don't know if you remember, but the game camera, they used to put 2 game cameras next to each other, which was so stupid. But I just said, why don't we make one of them a world feed camera? And then you can have 2 other ISO cameras on each side. And now you have one less camera you're worried about, and you can still tell the stories. And things like that we did. And, Johnny remembers good old Hockey Day in Canada. When I was doing the schedule, John whispered to Alan Clark, hey, you know what? Why don't we see if New York will give us, Hockey Day in Canada, all the Canadian teams playing each other. And Alan called me and said that he and John had talked, and what do you think of this idea? And I was like, it's in. You tell me who you want to play where, and I'll schedule it.
Our biggest problem, we had Calgary and Edmonton. That was an easy matchup. We had Toronto, Montreal. Our biggest challenge for that first one was to try to tell people in Vancouver your big rival that day is Ottawa.
Ottawa, I remember that. The first year was Ottawa.
But I tell you what, one man made the afternoon game, the Ottawa-Vancouver game, really viable, and that was Mark Crawford, who was the coach of the Canucks at the time. because he's an Eastern Ontario boy, right? He's from that part of the world, and he had the Canucks practice on the Rideau Canal the day before, and it created an awareness for Hockey Day because the Canucks. I mean, nobody practiced outside in those days. Nobody.
Right.
And so in February of 2000, the Vancouver Canucks are practicing on the Rideau Canal, and it almost like a light bulb went off across the country that, hey, wow, this is something special. By the way, the original concept was not to do a 4-hour pregame show. The original concept was to have, yes, the 3 games involving the 6 Canadian teams, but the original concept was to have a Canada-USA women's game. And Alan wanted to do. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but we didn't own the rights to Hockey Canada at that point. We owned the NHL, but we didn't own Hockey Canada rights, and TSN wouldn't sell it to us.
Wow.
So Alan walks in and he's forlorn that, here we got this problem. We got these 3 games, and we were going to start at noon. We're going to be noon, 3, 7, and 10.
10.
And we're gonna have a day of hockey, and it would, because remember 2000 was 2 years after the Americans beat Canada in Nagano for the gold medal in women's hockey. So the rivalry between the two teams was huge.
Yeah,
and,
we were there.
yeah, we were. And so I said to Alan, I said, well, don't give the time back. What? He says, what? He says, don't give the network the time back. We'll do a 4-hour pregame show. And he said, yeah, you can't do it. I said, no, we can do a 4-hour pregame show. I'm telling you right now, and we'll call it Hockey Day in Canada. That's how we'll do it. We'll do this, and we'll celebrate. And the first year was Hockey Day in Canada, celebrating the game. And we used all the facilities that the CBC had, because the CBC had remarkable facilities, and we did it like they would do an election. We had cameras in all 10 provinces and 3 territories, and we bounced around, and it was, if you were a hockey fan, you were in heaven, and that was how the first one really got developed. But it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened if TSN had given us the women's game. It would not have happened. So, again, like the glowing puck, some of the best things that happen is when you don't get what you want. That's right.
Happened by mistake.
Right. So, hey, anyway, boys, this was fun. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a great trip down memory lane. That's for sure.
Great seeing you, buddy.
Ditto, Mark.
This is a bittersweet time, because
sure is.
Since 1952 on television, starting next month will be the first time since 52 that Saturday night hockey will not be called Hockey Night in Canada. And I'm not here to bitch and moan about why that is. That's just a fact. And it's important to celebrate how we got here and how important people are to the game of hockey and what Hockey Night in Canada meant to most Canadians. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Back after this on 100% Hockey.
Hello, Canada and hockey fans in the United States and different lands.
Face Off Inside the NHL returns, taking you deeper behind the scenes than ever before. See it all from the star-studded Four Nations Face Off tournament
Us against the world, boys.
to the adrenaline of the Stanley Cup playoffs.
I'm scared of you guys.
With candid interviews and backstage access, experience the sacrifice, the rivalries, and the determination that define NHL greatness.
Just when I thought last year couldn't be topped, here we are.
A new season of Face Off Inside the NHL. Watch now only on Prime Video.
I think if you're a TV-aholic, you enjoyed that podcast. I know I had a bit of fun. Both Adamo and Askin have been very successful in their careers, and you can see how and why that is the case with the passion and knowledge they speak with, particularly when it comes to something like Hockey Night in Canada that meant so much to both of them. When we rejoin you next week, two guys that actually work together now and got their network starts on Hockey Night in Canada but didn't work together there, but are now joined at the hip. Mickey Redmond, who joined Hockey Night in 1980, and Kenny Daniels, who joined the show in the early 1990s. As we celebrate and remember what Hockey Night in Canada was for many Canadians. Thanks for listening and watching this edition of 100% Hockey.